Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. I'm Udar Pratap Singh. Our big focus this hour, U.S. Ukraine peace talks have begun in Saudi Arabia. A month after Trump and Zelenskyy clashed in the Oval Office, the U.S. officials are led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Ukraine delegation is being led by Zelenskyy. Before the talks, Rubio has promised to resume aid to Ukraine if ceasefire is agreed upon in Saudi Arabia. The talks come as Ukraine has carried out its biggest drone attack on Moscow, firing over 300 drones that have hit high rises. Escalation seems to be increasing as Trump has promised to end the Ukraine-Russia war. Joining us at this point, Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former diplomat. We also have Major General Sanjay Soi, defense expert, joining us live. Pathikrit Payan, geopolitical analyst, is also with us on the broadcast. Let me make a start with you first, Ambassador Dayal, on, of course, this visit and these talks in Riyadh. What is to be expected?
Well, first of all, let me say that it's an important development that these talks being the Ukrainians and the U.S. officials are being held in Jeddah. And both sides till now have expressed hopes that these talks will make substantial progress towards ending the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, some questions are being asked. The first question is, what are the respective positions of the US, Ukraine, and even Russia in regard to these ongoing talks? You know, Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, who has been arranging these talks, has said that the idea is to get down to a framework for a peace agreement and an initial ceasefire as well. He said that it is necessary for Ukraine to sign the minerals deal with the US, as this would create a joint fund from the sale of Ukrainian minerals. Now, Zelenskyy has said that Kyiv is ready to sign the minerals deal with the US, but he has also called for a truce in the air and at sea, and he has asked for a prisoner exchange as well. Moscow has rejected the idea of a temporary truce and has said that this was a bid to buy time for Kyiv and prevent its military collapse. So there is a very great divergence between the positions of Ukraine and Russia. Now, the second question being asked is, what are the chances of a positive outcome in today's talks between Ukraine and the United States? Now, here again, Steve Witkoff, the Mideast envoy of Donald Trump, has said that he had high hopes. And he asked whether Zelenskyy would return to the US to sign a minerals deal this week. He said he was very hopeful. Now, at the same time, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is leading the US side, was more cautious. And he said that the US is in a listening mode. He also said that the US wanted to get more details of Kyiv's position and what possible concessions Ukraine might be willing to make to the Russians in order to get a deal. So there is some divergence even within the US position in regard to what they see as the prospects. Now, the third question is very important, and that is this: will US President Donald Trump pressurize Russia if the need arises? He has been pressurizing Ukraine for sure, but the important question is, will he be able to pressurize Russia? Now, recently, Trump said that he's strongly considering large-scale sanctions and tariffs on Russia. And he said that until a ceasefire and a peace deal with Ukraine is reached, he will apply these sanctions. But at the same time, while his comments appear to be a sharp change in his tone, but many people feel that he was just trying to appear to be balanced, because there was a lot of criticism that all the pressure for a peace deal was being piled on only Ukraine and not on Russia. So it's possible that Trump's threat to Russia was an attempt to present himself as being more even-handed. Nonetheless, these are very important questions which are being asked in the context of today's talks between the US side and the Ukrainians being held in Jeddah. And of course, we are waiting to see what the outcome of these talks is going to be.
All right, let me in fact quickly then bring in at that point as well Major General Sohi. Major General Sohi, these are of course talks which come soon after the US has pulled the plug on aid to Ukraine. Interestingly, Marco Rubio has said if a peace deal is indeed agreed to, the aid will begin immediately. Pressure tactics by the US, how do we see these statements? Also, what are you hoping for will happen in Saudi Arabia?
In fact, two, three things I feel what Ambassador Prabhu has said is absolutely, I fully agree. It is a very, very detailed points here highlighted. Couple of things I would like to add here is you see the attacks have become more prominent, more vigorous from the both sides. Russia has increased the number of attacks, drone attacks, and similar thing is there with the Ukraine. So Ukraine is also making a point that I am not dead as yet. I am there. Don't worry if the US support is not there, I am still there to fight. That is one point. So everybody is trying to extract before the ceasefire starts and to have the better bargaining power. On the Russia is trying to push them out of the Kursk region to have the complete favorable bargaining chip. That is one point. Second thing is, as Ambassador Prabhu had also brought out, I was also thinking that, okay, you push Ukraine for the ceasefire. What are the conditions? Will Russia agree to those conditions? As Russia has already rejected the ceasefire and exchange of prisoners. So it has to be in a phased manner, probably, that ceasefire has to be there. Then only the attacks have to stop. Then only the ceasefire can be enforced. Without attacks being stopped, how will we enforce the ceasefire? So that is one angle. Second, exchange of prisoners will of course take a bit later. Gradually, that is maybe the next phase. But first of all, the exchange of fire, exchange of attacks has to stop from both sides. Next is, though Ukraine has come online, probably Zelenskyy had also gone to Saudi Arabia before the meeting. So is he trying to convince Saudi prince to pressurize US, to convince US for a favorable deal for Ukraine? Because Ukraine is not getting in return, except they are just signing the deal for rare earth minerals, and they are not even getting the assured security assurance. So that is another angle. So on the one side, there is a Russia and US talks which have taken place. What has transpired in that? Russia is trying to push Ukraine, and will America try to pressurize Russia? That is another angle. And America has also distanced itself from the European Union. European Union has come out in full support of Ukraine. How much support will they give? I mean, at present, it is in total turmoil how the thing will take shape. However, what I feel, Ukraine has generally agreed for rare earth deals. And what America says, with their presence in Ukraine, Ukraine will be safe. Let's see if this happens. If the ceasefire takes place, I think whole world will have a sigh of relief. Uday.
However, of course, Pathikrit Pine, interestingly, the attack on Russia by Ukraine, the biggest drone strike of its kind happening, in Moscow and in surrounding areas by Kyiv, just on the eve of this meeting, coincidental or something being conveyed?
Well, first of all, Uday, good evening to you and good evening to Ambassador Dal and General Soy. First and foremost, let me put it this way. For the last 3 years, this is a proxy war that's going on between the Western world and Russia. Ukraine is just a proxy. And Zelenskyy has been pumped up for the last 3 years by the West to presume that he's a very powerful man of a very powerful country. So until the time he realizes that the war will not end on his own conditions, this war is not going to end. Everything else can happen. They can have 10 number of meetings, nothing is going to work. Secondly, this attack on Russia with the drone attack, the Russians are saying almost 300 have been down, is an indication that there are many in the West who still don't want this war to get over. That is a reality. Third, I think the threats of sanctions on Russia by Trump is a big time bluff. The reason being there is hardly any trade between Russia and United States. Russia is one of the most sanctioned countries right now. And on the contrary, when Russia talks about a BRICS currency, Trump keeps on dancing. So let's understand that there are too many things being talked about by Trump and the administration on both sides. The reality is somewhere else. The reason why Zelensky is very much interested for a mineral deal is this. That mineral, I think the Americans can still get from the Russians. The Russians have offered something like that. Zelensky is presuming that if I get into a mineral deal with United States, in somehow I will be able to, entangle America into Ukraine, and if then there's an attack by the Americans which harms American interest, attack by the Russians, and it harms American interest in Ukraine, then US would do something, which is not going to happen. And the security assurance is something that Zelensky will never get. Zelensky will neither be part of NATO, neither America will give that assurance, and that is the dirty game that Zelensky is trying to play. To cut the long story short, I do not expect much happening here in Saudi Arab meeting, except for the diplomatic overtures from both sides and shaking of hands, till the time somebody diffuses Zelensky and tells him that you are a pumped up guy, you are nobody. You are just a country with less than $200 billion of GDP, fighting a war with borrowed money and borrowed weapons. You don't stand a chance for even 10 days if the supply of weapons stops. The supply of weapons from United States has stopped, but the supply of weapons from the Western Europe has not stopped. So this conflict is not going to end. If Zelensky wants that suddenly one day out of pressure, he can make the war end on his own terms, that is a utopian dream. And I still believe that the West still wants the war to happen till the last Ukrainian standing. That is a sorry state of affair. Trump might come and have a mineral deal, but that's not going to mean that if tomorrow the Russians attack somewhere where a particular American company is present, or a false flag operation and done by Zelensky or somebody else, then you can drag America into this war. That's not going to happen. So it is far more complicated than what it appears. There will be handshakes. There will be good talks. Zelensky, let me tell you, my last sentence, went to the Oval Office with the instruction from Western Europe to sabotage any kind of peace agreement. And that is why Europe today has pledged, EU has pledged 700 billion euro to be given to Zelensky and for military preparation. This war is far from over. If it gets over, great, we all will be happy. Neither a security assurance will come, nor this war will be over on Zelensky's terms. If there is any third option left, if it is done, well, then the war can end. Back to you.
Okay, Joyita Basu, let me quickly draw you in here on, of course, whether you believe a breakthrough is possible. Interestingly, despite that clash in the Oval Office, talks between US and Ukraine have not actually broken down completely. The aid, of course, has been cut off, but Marco Rubio says that there is a window for that to change, that decision to be reversed if Ukraine agrees to a truce. How likely is that? How unlikely is that, according to you?
First of all, when you are looking at the meeting, it is to an extent, I would say, the US is trying to be level handed, even handed in terms of, because even the Russia US talks between Lavrov and these Trump administration, Rubio and all, it took place in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, and this is taking place in Jeddah. So the thing is, you see, at one level, they are, if you look at it, because Qatar being such a central one of the quote unquote places where they have all the peace deals, Qatar has been sidelined. Saudi Arabia is getting into the picture. Saudi Arabia, Trump is close to Saudi Arabia, so they are looking at a place where they can have neutral talks. So that is number one, significant. Number two, when you are looking at this situation, I totally agree. The fact of the matter is that when Zelensky is at the helm, there is going to be no peace. There is no peace, and that is the reason why talks have already started between Trump and Trump's team and the opposition in Ukraine. First of all, I think one of the things that they are talking about, because when you are looking at Zelensky, Zelensky is the poster boy. Of course, he was the poster boy of the US also until recently, until Trump came into power, because you see there was strong possibility of peace in 2022 soon after the invasion by Russia, and they were all set to talk. Russia and Ukraine, they were going to talk peace. It was Britain, it was the US, specifically Boris Johnson, Biden. They decided that there is no way that there can be peace, and that is the reason why this war has dragged on for all these years. And you see, things have come to such a pass. The European leaders in particular, if you look at it, you see Trump is very clear. He is a no war president. We are not going to have any wars. There is going to be peace, there will be prosperity, there is going to be trade. But Zelenskyy is being goaded on by the Europeans, and this may, you see, once we start talking about this, could even be a change in the world order, because this may even lead to a breach in NATO. There is already a semi breach perhaps between the US and NATO, I mean, and the European countries. If the Europeans continue in this particular direction, there is going to be a breach between the US and Europeans in a very big way. He just might walk out of the NATO, because there is already pressure on him coming from his supporters and his ranks that we have to walk out of NATO. So, that possibility is already there. Now, you see the problem with that Zelenskyy, actually this Zelenskyy, by suddenly upping his ante, upping his arms, I mean upping his ante, what he is trying to do is that his plan, or rather the European plan, is to extract as much concessions as possible from Russia when they come on the negotiating table. Now, in the process, what might happen, as Pothikrit also said before this, you know, that there are some events or something bad happens and the US gets dragged into it, does not have a chance. So, that possibility is already there, but the thing is, then Zelenskyy is solely to blame for that, okay, because there was no need when you are talking peace and all that. So, why are you suddenly going and sending so many drones and God knows what attacking Moscow, and you are anyway losing that region in Kursk. So, but I think he has, you see, Zelenskyy is making this war about himself, about his survival, about his being the darling of the West, about his place. You know, he is now, he has got identified with that man who came on the cover of Vogue, the great liberator, the great democrat. I mean, I have heard enough Westerners talking about what a fantastic democracy Ukraine is, which is nothing but humbug. Okay. So, the whole point is that, you see, this is to a large extent about Europe's ego, about Zelenskyy's ego, to this is a large extent about basically to downing Putin, which is frankly right now seems like a totally what shall I say, it is an impossible dream. So, frankly Trump has the, at the same time, you see, it is all about Europe's relevance, because the minute this war stops, Europe becomes irrelevant, because it is already irrelevant, it is after all a local war. Trump wants the focus shifted to Indo-Pacific. The Europeans are trying their very best to keep the focus on themselves, because they realize they have become irrelevant and they do not want to sink into further irrelevance. That is why they are pushing this war.
Okay. Let me take that back to Major General Sohi as well. Major General Sohi, you know, what according to you is going to lead to the breakthrough finally coming out? Is more responsibility now on the Europeans as well to not go down Zelenskyy, as some of our panelists are saying? How can a truce be finally reached?
It's a big challenge. In fact, what I told you earlier also, there is a US versus Europe now, the US versus Ukraine, and US versus Russia. So, there are three different angles. And suddenly, after Trump came on power and in power on 20th January, things have gone totally topsy-turvy. Thing I wanted to highlight is, if Ukraine did not have the rare earth, will there be a war? Would there still be a war? Ukraine signed a 100-year deal with England in January. I mean, did this irk USA? That Europe is after the rare earths of Ukraine, in spite of US giving all the support. US has given $350 billion, Europe has given only $100 billion, and Europe is trying to corner all the rare earth material, everything they are trying to corner. Or is it ultimately, it is all economy, ultimately it is all money. They are after it. They realized that one of the aim was to weaken the Russia, which probably they failed miserably. Russia has weakened a bit, but Who has weakened more? Is it Europe has weakened more or Russia has weakened more? That is again a question to be thought of. So at present, though Zelensky has softened up his stand and he is ready to sign the rare earth deal, that is one point. And I think the security assurance, probably they may have to agree. And because American pressure is too much, without that, what other speakers have also brought out, Ukraine will not be able to survive for long. That's why probably this deal may happen between ceasefire will happen. However, what are the conditions, terms and conditions, that is yet to be seen. Uday.
Okay, let me come back across to you, Ambassador Prabhudeval. Ambassador Prabhudeval, how many more rounds of talks you believe before a deal could be sealed? Are we close to it according to you, or does this latest attack by Kyiv in Moscow prove that they are not ready for a truce just yet?
I think we are quite far away from any meaningful truce. Patrick Payne was absolutely right when he said that the outcome of today's meeting might just be handshakes. Because even the US side, which is led by Marco Rubio, has said that this might just be a listening exercise. While Steve Witkoff has been quite optimistic, but Marco Rubio has said that he would just try to understand what the Ukrainians really want to get at. And so it more is like an occasion for the US to try and assess the position of the Ukrainians. Now, Joita was absolutely right that Trump sees Zelensky as an obstacle. And in fact, there are attempts being made behind the scenes to get rid of him, to get him out of the way, and to change the government. So, at the moment, everything is very fluid, very uncertain. Trump said that he would bring the war to an end on the very first day of his being in office. Now, that has, of course, not happened, but he's trying his best to push towards a peace deal. It's not that easy, because even if he strikes a deal with Ukraine for its mineral resources, what about a deal really between the Ukrainians and the Russians? Are the Russians prepared to give an inch to the demands of the Ukrainians? Or the other way around, is Ukraine willing to accept all the loss of its territory? I'm afraid that the Russia-Ukraine peace deal might be much, much more difficult than the US side is making it out to be. So today's meeting might be some kind of an occasion for the two sides, the Ukrainians and the Americans, to assess each other's position. But beyond that, I don't think any meaningful progress is expected to take place.
All right, let me quickly, in fact, also then go back across to you, Joyita Basu, on this, aspect, of course, of U.S.-Ukraine relations. Will they perhaps be mended to a certain extent after this meeting, if those handshakes do happen, if there is some sort of progress? Will relations be mended, or will that only happen once a truce is reached?
No, I mean, there has to be some kind of a mending of relations, otherwise how will they be possibly talking peace with Russia also, and with mediation of the U.S. Now, so thing is that I think they are kind of trying to tell the world that, listen, we are being even handed. We have talked to the Russians and now we are exactly talking to the Ukrainians. But I have a feeling that what this chat is more about, this discussion is more about assessing whether Zelensky has changed his stance from the time he met Trump and Vance in the White House 2 weeks ago I think, or 3 maybe. So, and from then to here, because soon after that talk he had and that breakdown of talks, he ran to Europe, he ran to London, and he was clearly heard calling Trump names, and the US he was calling names, and he was very clear that he doesn't want to have peace, because of which Trump stopped aid at that point of time. So, I think this is more of a meeting to assess whether how adamant Zelensky is about sticking to his stand. I think after this meeting they will take a decision on how to go about in handling Zelensky. But you see, it seems the brief from Trump is pretty clear. He has made it very clear publicly, openly, for the whole world to see that there is not going to be any war, there has to be peace, there has to be peace, there has to be peace. Now, how that comes about, we do not know yet, but yes, Trump thinks that Zelenskyy is a problem in this case.
Okay, my thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this broadcast. It's time for a very short break, much more on the other side.